Good afternoon, Danny.
Hi.
I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Thank you so much. I have to say, I'm like nervous. Like, I have not been nervous on my show in a long time. And I think it's just because of the nature of who I have with me today, my own
I know.
personal therapist. So I'm really just, yeah.
And let me tell you, I appreciate that because, in my field, we're so well trained to ask people to tell us about themselves. And, the idea that I'm going to have to sit and just talk about myself to some degree for the next whatever period of time, it's a lot. I get
Yeah.
it. So I'm totally with you on that.
Okay. Well, I'm
Yeah.
just nervous
We're
because
doing it.
the
We're
world knows.
doing it.
I'm nervous because I'm letting the world know, one, I have a therapist and that this is my therapist. So, but I've always had a really good relationship to getting support. So it felt natural to want to do this to help people just not be afraid or have trepidation about therapy. So I'm so grateful that when I asked you, you said yes and that you're here. And we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about whatever. It's funny. We were talking before we went live, and I said, I don't know what we're gonna talk about. And you said, it sounds like your therapy session, which is the case, right?
And then somehow it always happens.
Somehow
Yeah.
I have tons of things to talk about.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, we're going to talk about your mental health experience and what got you into this work, and just the things that I'm doing around destigmatizing mental health to really help people get the care that they deserve. But before we dive into that, just a little bit about my series. I created Michelle's Conversations That Matter because I really wanted to talk openly about mental health and do my part to elevate the conversation, empower people, educate people. And you probably are like episode 112 at this point. And what I do professionally is I work with organizations to cultivate cultures of compassion and teach employees resilience and tips and tools to be able to navigate what we're going through and beyond. So I'm so grateful you're here. And if you could take a second, just introduce yourself to my audience, who you are, where you live, what you do.
Sure, 100%. And let me just say up front, Michelle, I am so grateful that you invited me. And I think that the work that you're doing is so important. And it's an extension of the stuff that I do. I mean, let's face it, I do it one-on-one, and you're doing it for companies and corporations and organizations. And you're extending a lot of that same ideal into the universe. So I'm happy to be supporting you, and I'm grateful to be part of this. So I am a psychiatrist. I'm in private practice, and I work in New Jersey, in South Orange, New Jersey, which is where I live. And I have an office in the city, in Union Square. And shall I tell you a little bit about my background?
Yeah.
So I did my psychiatry training at NYU, and I was a former unit chief at one of the men's shelters in New York City for a bunch of years. I worked as a psychiatric consultant to 3 agencies working with at-risk youth, teenagers for many years. But, really we served a broad population of teens for all of that time. And I have advanced training from the Ackerman Institute for the Family and the NYU Division of Human Sexuality. So that's my background training. That's how I kind of, that's the formal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am also a widower and the parent of a 6-year-old son. That's a big part of my personal story as well. We were together for about 18 years. He passed away, and that's me.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your son in a minute, but I want to first start off by saying, one of the things that that when I reached out to you to get support, like I really just want to go back to that moment where I was going through a lot in my life. And I had always had a healthy relationship to reaching out for care when I needed it. And I was really struggling in what I was dealing with in my life. And I reached out to you, and I remember like connecting with you and and how supportive you were, and just how different you were from other therapists that I had been in their care. And I just appreciated your approach. And, you know, what I like to tell people is we all have past traumas and life experiences, and mine, a lot of people here know, the people who are watching know my story, that I grew up with a mother who was incredibly abusive, and she was bipolar, and it was a rough experience, and wrote a book about it. And I like to explain to people that, like, that's my color of my past, is like, you know, that's what I grew up with. That was my experience. But like, everyone has something, might have something, some kind of trauma or experience. And there should be no shame or fear or embarrassment around acknowledging it and getting help. And so, you know, I just want to, you know, start off by saying that yeah, I had a rough childhood, but I'm still in inquiry, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And it's a journey, and I will never stop, because it shaped me. And I don't think we should have any embarrassment around that.
Yeah, I was, so there's a couple of things that you make me think about. The first thing is, when I'm meeting with somebody at the beginning, and one of the things that I say to families when they have a family member that's very seriously mentally ill, and they're trying to get them into treatment for the first time or early on in their experience, I always say that the absolute most important thing to do right now is to build a rapport between the patient and the therapist and the mental health practitioner, because you want people to feel that there is an entire universe of help out there, and to not be afraid to keep asking and accessing that. You know, if you set a foundation for that early on for somebody, then that gives them the opportunity to keep pursuing their own, what will I call it? Their own personal development, let's call it. Okay. I don't want to just narrow it down to healing, their own personal development. And I was you and I were talking about this, that I was doing a little bit of research and watching your program before we met today. And you had interviewed this guy, Jeremy Green, not so long ago.
Yeah.
And I was really struck by something he said, because he had a very intense personal story. Yeah. And this might sound obvious, but for me, for some reason, it really like clicked in my mind. Like, he did so many different things over the course of his life. And then suddenly he realized, he's like, oh my God, I really have like an incredible compendium of knowledge about how to manage who I am, my own complexity, right? And that's what I think we all need to do. Because there isn't one thing that's going to be the answer for any one of us at any one moment. It's like the thing that worked before is not going to work again. You did this diet before, you're not going to do the same diet again. It's going to be boring. Some people could do it, but most people have to try a variety of things over the course of their life, depending on where they are.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about what you think had you gravitate to your career of helping people.
It's a funny story, actually. So I think that I wanted to be a psychiatrist from a young age. I can remember from a very young age saying that. And I sometime in my 30s, I think, I was walking down the street. I was living in the city at the time, and I was walking down the street, and I saw some books that somebody had left out on a stoop, and to give away. Mm-hmm. And I picked up a copy of this book, Ordinary People. And I remembered that I had seen the movie when I was a kid, and that I liked it. And I said, let me read the book. So I got home and I started reading it sometime after that. And I realized that I had really decided to be a psychiatrist because of the character in the movie from when I was a kid, because I was so impressed with what he did with this young man who was really in a very terrible state, and how much he had transformed his life through his commitment to that person's healing. And I loved the way he did it. I loved his whole style. And I even realized, like, you might notice this, like, I always wear a sweater. I always wear like a cardigan. He always wore a cardigan.
Now I'm gonna be
like my Mr. Rogers sweater. Like, he wore one of those, and I was like, oh my God, this is where it started. So I must have seen that movie when I was like 12 or something.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. That's so funny. tell us a little bit about your son and what is it that you love about being his father?
Oh, well, so there's a pretty intense personal story associated with that, that my husband and I went through the surrogacy process, and there was a difficulty with the pregnancy at one point, so a parameter that wasn't going well. And my husband had to go down to where the surrogate was and talk to the OBs about it. And when he came home, he said, okay, everything's okay. And on the way home, he stopped off at the doctor because he was having some problems walking. And he stopped off at the doctor and he found out that he had ALS. And it happened right then in the middle of the pregnancy. And by the time my son was born, my husband was in a wheelchair. And not long after that, he was completely paralyzed and he was on a respirator and only communicating with his eyes. And it was a very devastating thing to live through. So my son is so precious to me now. There's like this incredible preciousness that I just have about him. Mm-hmm. And I'm touched by it so much, like I'm so impressed with the magic of his existence in my life because of that. And listen, he's really cool. He's super cool. He's really funny. He's smart. He's a good kid. He's loving. He's great company. He's insane. He drives me crazy. Oh my God. So much fighting. He is so stubborn, but he's such a good person and he's a lot of fun. That's my story. That's it. I mean,
yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about your approach, because I have to say that, I have been to other therapists before you, and I always felt like, I was like exhausted and completely a mess when I would leave other therapy. But when I go to you, I always leave you feeling uplifted and empowered because of your style and your approach. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also because of the spirituality aspect that you weave into your healing. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where that comes from and why you have that approach?
Yeah, let's see if I can. It's a lot of answer. So I think I thought about this before coming today, and I think one of the difficulties I have is I don't really know how other people, work. So it's a little hard for me to sort of guess. But I know a lot of people say that same thing to me, that the work they do with me is quite different. I think I was trying to think about what part of this could be. So part of it, I think, is I really love people, and I create my work out of love. I think that people really know, like, I love them, I care about them, I want the best for them. Like, that's all I'm thinking about. I'm just here to like help you be the best person you can be and to like live into your whole possibility. So I think that makes a big difference because I'm very clear about it and I'm very open about it. Like, I'm guided by that. I was thinking about how, therapists and psychiatrists probably are more likely to be either empathic, and I'm not that empathic, like, I love people, but I don't feel sorry for them that much. Like, I'm really more interested. I'm more curious about what's happening than I am feeling sorry for them. I think that's something. And I'm coming from a place of like a lot of curiosity because of that. Or also I think there's a lot of people in my field that are sort of like the authorities. Mm-hmm. And I don't think about it that way either, because there's so much we don't know. And so I'm always approaching it with tremendous curiosity. Oh, and I think that the thing that you're trying to touch upon also is that the way I envision the work that I do, and a lot of the time that I spend during the day, is I feel like people are coming into the office and each person is giving me another answer to the riddle of life. Wow. Like, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be here? What is the universe? What is humanity? What is life itself? Like, we don't even know what life is. Yeah. We have so many stories about what life is, but I feel like every single person has a piece of the answer. Right. And so I'm listening all the time to that, and I'm putting together connections. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very unique about my role, because most people are not sitting and listening to people tell them about the universe. Yeah. And I just spend that all day long. I spend listening to people talk to me. So in that way, I become somebody who can reflect that back to people again and again and again. Not just you're saying this, but people are saying this, and I can make connections.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that is very helpful and appreciated by a lot of people.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And when I go to you, I don't feel like I'm going to you because I'm broken and I need you to fix me. And so that leads me to my next question. You have always said to me to live into my ambition. You've always said, live into my ambition. And so when I go to you, I'm like, all right, so today I'm going to have a session and I'm going to help remove some maybe hurdles to help me live fully into my ambition. Where does that come from? And why is that so important for you to convey to people?
I think that over time, one of the things that I've come to think about altogether is that we are guided by certain resources that we are born with. And human beings all have, so among the many resources that I could mention, ambition is something that is, I don't want to say that it's uniquely human, but it is elevated to an exaggerated degree in humanity, much more than any other life form. Okay. It's a much more rudimentary piece of other life in this world. But human beings are so driven by ambition. You know, all the choices that we're making, almost everything like I was thinking about this thing about how they landed this rover on Mars and they had the drone, and I thought, what is that about? Or recently I was in Utah and I was talking to my kid about digging for dinosaur bones, and I'm thinking, what is all this about? And scientists will come up with reasons why they do what they do, but ultimately they do it because they're curious, because they want to. They're going to find the reason after they find the thing. And that's exactly what human beings are like. But ambition is causing us always to be, our mind is always somewhere where we're not, you know? And so that's turbulence. That's always going to create turbulence because we're always smaller than our ambitious selves. So there's a turbulent process that's going on inside of us. So I always say that most of the time, not everybody, but most of the people that are coming in to see me, a lot of their suffering is in the realm of ambition. It's not in their actual contemporary life. Their contemporary life is okay.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And that was my biggest, we're not going to get into Michelle's stuff, but like, I always had ambition, like always, like what's next? What am I going to go, you know, how am I going to do more and serve more and have more and be more? And I always was like that. I had a mentor once say to me, it's good that you get fidgety. It's good that you get bored because then you're going to keep pushing yourself to expand and grow. And I love that when she told me that. And then like I meet you and you're just like, yeah, you're just trying to live into your ambition and that's the issue. And I'm like, oh.
You're actually an amazing example of somebody like I see people that have not a similar story to you necessarily, but a similar personal journey in that you've traveled incredibly far from your point of origin, you know? Like you weren't trained to be the person that you are today. This is coming from inside of you out.
Right.
Right. But what we can say is that everything that occurred in your early life is helping to shape your complexity for better and for worse.
Right.
You know, like you wouldn't necessarily be pursuing the thing you're pursuing if some of the things in your childhood hadn't occurred. You would have directed that in some avenue. You know?
Yeah, so true. It's so true. So as you know, I am on a mission to normalize the mental health conversation. We've spoken about that a few times. And, you know, for me, the thought of someone suffering is very upsetting because I witnessed my mom suffering and I hate the idea of someone suffering in silence, not getting care, and then ultimately, you know, taking their life. And so I find myself using words that you have used to me multiple times in our sessions. And you say, you know, we are all unique and complex human beings.
Mm.
And I love that, because that statement that we're all unique and complex human beings just sort of gives us permission to just be us and be okay being who we are. Where does that, where does that come from? And why is that so important for us to really understand when it comes to removing stigma?
Oh, let's see. So, yeah, again, it's a big question. All right. So I guess a couple of things that I'll say about this. The first one is that it's about learning that we have to take every piece of ourselves with us.
Yeah.
Okay. And people who are doing that are creating an amazing amount of stuff in the world. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. When they're honest about taking all of their selves with them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times we have these perceived uglinesses, and we spend a lot of time trying to cover them up, hide them, get them out of exercise them from our being. Yeah. And so what's happening is that we're creating this tension, because they're like bonded. Those are things that are bonded to every other piece of our spirit. So we can't actually do that. But what we're doing is we're fighting, we're clashing with ourselves, right? So I'm always listening and thinking about opportunities about how we can learn to love our ugliness. And in the sense that it's always our perceived ugliness, right? So one of the things that I say, that you've probably heard me say plenty of times, is our ugliness is simply our unformed potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't know how to be in the world yet.
Yes.
And so if we listen to it, we'll find a place for it to go. Yes. We'll find something that we can use that thing for. As you said, your own past is one of the things that helped create a path for you today. And it wasn't something that was a comfortable time in your life, but it was something that has created a pathway towards personal power for you, toward personal growth, personal empowerment, as you said, use that word. Yeah. So I think that's why I think to myself, we have to listen curiously to not what sucks about us, I mean, there's plenty of stuff that sucks about us at any one moment in time. It's true.
Yeah.
But also, what is it? Where can it go? What's it about? What's it trying to tell me? What can I do with this piece of myself?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I feel like we feel wrong or bad for having the ugliness that is within us, but we have it. So we might as well learn to.
We have it. We have it. We're not going to get rid of it. It'll just transform and form. It'll become something new if we really work on it. Again, you look at I was listening to the people that you've been interviewing, and I was thinking about Jessica Ashe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And I was thinking about the story she told about her brother, and God, it's a little bit heartbreaking, but again, it shaped her, and she has created something amazing out of that.
Yes.
It's all true. It's just the truth.
Yeah.
And there's even crazier examples. Like, we could talk for a while about all kinds of crazy examples in the world that look like that.
Yeah.
So many.
I know that you have treated some very, very sick people. And that even you mentioned earlier in the interview the work that you did in New York. So, like, this is not part of the questions that I sent you. Sorry. Okay. I just wanted to ask you, like, is that hard? Does that become hard when you are dealing with? I mean, I remember one day walking into your office. This is what's coming up for me. Walking into your office, and you were dealing with a crisis of, I think it was an adolescent who was needing to get into a hospital because they were sick. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you deal with that on the day-to-day yourself? Trying to give the best care, but knowing, some of these people might not do okay.
So I think I would answer that in two ways. I mean, first of all, look, every day is not easy. Every day is not easy, like, for any of us. Some days are very hard. Some days are very sad. Some days are very upsetting. And there are days that I can be hopeless, just like the rest of us. there's nothing that I'm going to ever say about the work that I do or about life in general that is going to eliminate suffering from our existence. You know, there's a lot going on. Life is full of challenges, and sometimes we can vanquish those, and sometimes they will, stomp on us, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like everybody else in that way. But maybe this is also an answer that is helpful. When I used to work at the men's shelter, I used to work in the morning in the men's shelter, and I used to go to my private office in the afternoon. And I learned pretty quickly that there was no greater level of suffering reported among my shelter patients than among my private patients. You know? And you start to realize very, very quickly that circumstances are not the cause of suffering necessarily.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Yeah.
So much of it is coming from our perception about ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, about our judgment about ourselves, our judgment about our capacity to deal with stuff, our judgment about our ability to be loved, to be present for other people to be present for us. It's all about how we feel about ourselves with the world. You know? So and different people are different in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially now during the pandemic and people are just trying to navigate everything that's going on, whether it's, loss of life, loss of a job, loss of routine, there's a lot of challenges that people are dealing with. And I also, it gives me a glimmer of hope that we're openly starting to talk about mental health, because it's so real for so many, which is like, sort of, in my eyes, the silver lining of COVID is finally maybe we're putting a light on a very important topic that hasn't had a light on it.
Good point.
So what would you say around suffering and silence? Like, I know you just mentioned the suffering that you experienced both in, with the shelter and with your private, but now in the face of COVID, I know there are people probably out there who are suffering in silence and not getting care. Is there something that you would say to them or to someone who loved them, who wanted them to maybe get some type of support?
I think in general, I certainly have thought about this question, and I think it's such a good one. I think it's so important, and I know it's a lot of the work that you do. So we live in a time now where there are so many opportunities for self-expression in general, so many different ways to do it directly and indirectly, so many ways for us to connect with the world outside of ourselves. And thank God, thank God. We live in a time where we really value self-expression. And I really believe that people who are more comfortable and courageous about their self-expression, talking with others about their complexity, sharing, listening, exploring, I think that those are the people that really can live into the best of themselves, because they're learning how to bring all of themselves with them. So the more that you just go online, for anybody, just go online.
Yeah.
And just type in anything related to what you're doing and just how can I get help? And it'll be out there. Anybody who's listening here, right? I mean, for sure, you're already doing the work, and everybody that, even if they just, frankly, honestly, I was so impressed when I was going through your kind of compendium of live streams. Like, there's so many great people that are doing so much good work that you have connected with and that you've been telling people about. Like, this is all out there. Like, you're really doing your part. Podcasts, and there's, AA, like I say all the time, go to AA, go to 12-step groups. So many 12-step groups that are out there for anything. And they're all available now virtually.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Everything's available virtually. And it doesn't take anything. It's like a click.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really at our fingertips, which is amazing. Do you have any final words of wisdom? Because our time is almost over.
No worries. Let's see. So what I would say is ask more questions. That's what I say to people all the time. We never ask enough questions. We never ask enough questions. We are either afraid to ask, or we don't realize that we haven't been asking. We make assumptions constantly.
Yes.
The more we ask questions, the more we just ask and decide that we don't know, just accept that we don't know, the more we have opportunity to change and to grow. And then if we just happen to say a nice thing every now and then to somebody around us, everybody wins.
It's so cool. I love that. I love that. Curiosity is really where it's at.
It's the answer.
Yes. So Danny, people want to catch you. Your website's at the bottom there on the ticker. I am so grateful for this time with you. Thank you so much for joining me. I just have enjoyed it, and I so appreciate you. And thank you for all that you do for your patients, and thank you for what you've done for me.
Michelle, thank you so much for asking me. This was great.
Awesome. All right. I'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye.